Welcome to the Meet Your Army virtual engagement hosted by Army Outreach Division in support of U.S. Army Public Affairs. I'm Major Pete Nguyen, and it is my absolute pleasure to serve as your moderator today. As a Vietnamese American, I'm especially excited to take part in today's discussion as I'm joined by the highest ranking Vietnamese American officer in the United States Army, Major General Viet Luong. General Luong fled the Vietnam War at the age of 9 with his family and arrived in America as a refugee. Today, he's going to share his remarkable journey from landing on the deck of the USS Hancock as a frightened 9-year-old boy to leading U.S. Army Japan as an Army Major General. Over the next 30 minutes or so, General Luong will share his experiences and thoughts with us as we learn more about his Army story. Regardless of where you are joining us from or how you found us, thank you for watching this timely discussion. So, without any further ado, sir, thank you so much for taking some time out of your busy schedule to join us today. Would you like to provide any opening remarks to everyone joining us?
Yes, sure. Ohayou gozaimasu from Japan, and it's greetings to all of you dialing in. It's my great honor to be here today. And first and foremost, I would tell you that, as you may have seen on the brochures and maybe my bio, I'm listed as a first in many categories. However, from my foxhole, I would tell you I'm simply just a soldier, like many of you, who's trying to do his duty to the fullest. I would also say that I would not be sitting here without the great efforts of my soldiers, non-commissioned officers, and mentors along the way. And I also owe a great debt to my parents and my sisters for their sacrifices and the enduring support from my wife Kim and my family. But in any case, it's great to be here. It's good to see some of you.
Sir, thank you so much. I recently listened to your NPR interview from 2015 when you oversaw the training of Afghan troops near Kandahar. In that interview, you detail your journey as a Vietnamese refugee to a U.S. Army general. I can hear the emotion in your voice as you describe the way you felt 45 years ago. When I hear your voice shakes, it makes me think about my own family and what it must have been like for all Vietnamese people who followed a similar path to the U.S. Can you tell us about your journey leaving Vietnam from when your father held a family meeting to the way you felt when you landed on the deck of the USS Hancock?
Yeah, absolutely, Pete. And just to be honest, the scars from that event are indelible, and that's why it's hard for me to be able to maintain or control my emotions when I have to retell it. I don't like to retell that story all that much, but I think it's a story that needs to be told because it's part of who we are as Americans, and it's a story of our nation. And so I have told that story a few times, including when I was in Kandahar, and I was actually probed on that story. So it goes back to February or March 1975, and I remember that very vividly because it was such a cataclysmic event in my life, So my father at that time was serving as the executive officer to the equivalent of the U.S. Marine Corps Commandant, the South Vietnam Commandant, Lieutenant General Lê Nguyên Khang at that point. And I remember him, out conducting battlefield circulation with the general and coming back, very dejected. And he's typically a very upbeat and a very positive person. And I remember him coming back, and I actually overheard him telling my mom that the country was doomed and there's no way we were going to win the war. So shortly thereafter, he started a series of family meetings. And, my sisters, my 4 oldest sisters, they were, my oldest 2 were already in college. They were just absolutely brilliant. My other 2 sisters attended South Vietnam's top girls' high school, which is Trinh Vuong. So they were all pretty brilliant in their own rights and very, very strong women of Vietnamese heritage. And so they participated. I didn't get a chance to participate because I was too young, but I always made sure that I was always on the margins of these meetings. And I remember my dad resolutely wanting to go back to the Marine Division and continue to fight. And I remember for the first time, or one of the few times I actually saw my mom and my sisters pushing back on him, is that, what about the family? I mean, the Marine Division was spread all throughout the country, fighting for its life. And, my mom was like, what worth are you in coming back to join that fight? And you're a staff guy now. What kind of authority do you think you have to be able to do that? So they fought him pretty hard on it. So they started talking about other options. The most prominent is, because I was the only boy, big Catholic family as well, sending me to the U.S. to live with one of his advisors ahead of time, just to try to save the family lineage there, and perhaps sending one or two of my sisters forward. But in any case, at 9 years of age, I just it was gut-wrenching for me to see my parents go through that. And then shortly thereafter, in April, I remember my dad coming back, and he whispered to my mom, telling her that one of his American friends wanted to facilitate our escape from Vietnam due to the deteriorating situation. And shortly thereafter, I remember roughly on the 25th or 26th of April, we were told, hey, pack your stuff and only take, the clothes you wear on your back and the documentations that you would require to leave the country. So we did exactly just that. We bounced around, for a couple of days. I remember staying at the Caravel Hotel in Saigon, and then we moved into the World Vision compound. Very secretive, the whole time. And on the 27th of April, 1975, we ended up entering Tan Son Nhut Airport. It was extremely crowded, very small terminal, and we were outside on the hot tarmac for, it seems like, for an eternity, just waiting our turn to be processed. And the next day, kind of all hell broke loose. We started receiving mortars and artillery fire. We can hear small arms fire all throughout the outside of the airport. And then a couple of enemy aircraft came in and bombed the airstrip. And I remember my dad, we were all cowering, lying on our bellies. My dad said to stay down. And he was on his knee, and he says, kids, don't worry, you'll be okay. You're missing out on a monumental historical event. And he was so calm that it made a lot of us feel safer. But in any case, rounds are still coming in. People close by were getting hit, and I remember their screams and cries, and I was scared to death. And I was laying on my belly, and as a 9-year-old, you do probably the only thing a 9-year-old could have done at that moment was I recited my Hail Marys, and I recited my prayers. So we got through the day, and then, but there was a great degradation of hope because we were told that the U.S. decided to stop all fixed-wing operations. So we were just waiting for the inevitable, for communist forces to start storming the airport gates and then whatever we had coming to us. And then that afternoon, I saw my dad talking to a young Marine, U.S. Marine captain and RTO, who was still the security force there. And after that, he instructed, all the men in the area to start clearing a landing zone. And he said Marine helicopters were coming to the rescue. And that afternoon, we saw a beautiful formation of CH-53s come in to the airport. And we waited our turn. The next day, we received our lift assignment. They were flying seat outs, and it was 60 Vietnamese per load, and we got on the aircraft. I remember flying out. I remember tracers coming up at us. I remember the door gunners shooting back, and 30 minutes later, we landed, and a lot of Vietnamese on board started to tell other people that, hey, they're probably just dropping us off on some island right off the coast of Vietnam. And I believed that because I didn't know any better. So when we came off, the tail of the aircraft there, it was really a magnificent sight, And I asked my dad, I'm like, Dad, where we're at? And I remember him telling me, he says, we are embarked aboard the USS Hancock. And I said, what does that mean? And he says, it means that nothing in the world can harm you now. And again, that was, for me, a very monumental occasion, very monumental event in my life that I hold true to this day. And in a lot of ways, that whole experience on the USS Hancock has motivated me to serve and to follow my father's footsteps.
Wow. Sir, we spoke previously, and I mentioned to you that my family background is very similar. I'm the only one of 5 children who was born in the United States. Both of my parents were boat people. And so as you were telling your story, I couldn't help but remember being woken up in the middle of the night because my dad, who was in the South Vietnamese Army, he had night terrors very late into his life. And I remember being woken up by them. These experiences that you had, as a soldier, as a young lieutenant, as an infantryman, were you able to draw upon some of these experiences, these memories, your father's stories, to help you in your soldiering?
Yeah, absolutely. My dad was my, really, he still is my hero. Unfortunately, he passed in 1997, but so his leadership has really helped shape me into the leader that I am today. I watch him throughout the war, and I watch him, lead the family through this very traumatic experience, and I have, just great admiration for him. And on top of that, he got a degree in English literature from the University of Saigon, so he's intellectually, he was very gifted. So I was able to benefit a lot from that, right? So that's first and foremost, it's the leadership piece. He's always, keen on, leaders being able to lead from the front, be able to share the same hardship with your soldiers. And he always tell me, treat your soldiers like your sons and daughters. So I've lived by those ethos. So first and foremost, it really has shaped who I am as a leader. In terms of being there and seeing it all and actually having gone through these traumatic events, it just made me stronger as a person. People say, well, when I was a lieutenant, Ranger School was tough, and I went through it. I'm like, well, maybe it's not all that tough, right? Maybe there are things in life that are tougher. So it's taught me that. It's taught me to have great compassion for people. I will tell you, for those who know me, so I'm a pretty tough leader. I mean, I demand pretty high standards, but I also have deep loyalty and compassion. And those are the values that I had before coming in the Army. And of course, all the institutional values that have been inculcated in me as well. But I think diversity and experience, gives the Army strength.
Sir, thank you very much. I want to shift gears just a little bit and ask you something that's, I think, is being discussed a lot in the civilian sector, and should definitely be discussed here in our profession as well. And it's about equality and inclusion at the top. I know representation is important. I see it in the way that my small children play, the dolls that they choose. They always choose the ones that look like them. When you came through the ranks, did you see diversity at the top? Was there someone that looked like you or had similar experiences that you could go to for mentorship? Did you question whether there was a ceiling for you, and how did you navigate that?
Yeah, that's a great question that sometimes I still ask myself that today. And I would tell you very honestly that we were not very diverse when I first came into the Army. And I can speak not only for myself, but for some of my colleagues who are African American, as well as Hispanic, right? In the infantry and in the combat arms in general, we were not very diverse back then. I would argue that there's great room for improvement right now because within those populations, including Asian Americans, not very diverse. I found myself, I think for that first year in command until General Viet Kim arrived the second year in 82nd Airborne as only one of 27 battalion commanders of Asian descent. And I think we had one African American, so not very well represented. Carl Alex, he became a 2-star. He's a great friend of mine. And when I became a brigade commander, it's sort of similar. When I was younger, maybe I was too naive. I just kind of never worried about that. I was just like, hey, just put your nose to the grinder, do your best, and always excel just to achieve the average, right? I always felt like I had to outperform folks in everything that I do. And some of my friends, were talking about, hey, how can we help the force become more diverse? And I was too naive to even worry about that. I said, hey, why don't we just do our jobs and everything will work out? Well, it doesn't work like that, right? In order to be successful, you need a lot of support. You need mentorship. You need advocacy. And I felt, and I'm not bitter about any of this stuff, right? I mean, I'm sitting here as a 2-star general, but as I look back, after I had taken brigade command, I'm looking for opportunities to open doors for others, who may not have the same opportunity. I'm not just talking about Asian Americans, because a lot of infantry officers that I mentor now just happens to be, African American. And so I try to do that. I also try to do mentorship for female officers that also, require some assistance in terms of, their charting a path to a successful career in some of these branches that may not include a lot of women. So as I look back, I realized that even in my younger days that there were doors that were open for some of my peers and advocacy that they had and mentorship that they had pretty much at every turn, including now, that I didn't have. But I think in order to correct that, I think we it's going to take a little time, and we got to go back, early on, right? Because it takes years to create, a great officer or NCO. So I think we got to start with recruiting. We got to start with retention and trying to attract the top talent into the field. And I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done right now, specific to Asian American. Do I think there's a top ceiling? No, I do not think so, because to me, if you ask me, hey, should we think outside the box? I'm like, what box, right? But at the same time, I will tell you, it's very, very tough. The ceiling is very high, and the ceiling is tough, and the path to get there may be tougher for some of us than others. And we got to do that through a holistic approach, and I would welcome any ideas, and I would contribute to that effort if the opportunities exist to do that.
Sir, thank you. I'm just going to ask you directly. There's a small cohort. I don't think that there are many, but in recent days and months, their voices have been a little louder. And the question that they ask is, does diversity matter? And of course, the Army's program, the Army's belief, and the Army's values, we say consistently. I think we've been consistent, in saying that diversity is a strength. Can you tell us why? Why is diversity something that is needed in our Army?
Yeah, no, I think there's great strength in diversity, right? As I stated before, diversity allows you to have diversity of culture and diversity of thought. It just makes us stronger. I'll give you one quick example. We had a team building session last week, right? And this little vignette I just grabbed last week is a perfect example of why diversity in culture and thought is important. So we were split up into small groups, and we were doing actually our campaign support plan offsite, and we had some team building events. And one of the team building events consists of groups getting together and pictorially demonstrate how to make toast, right? And I think some of you all may be exposed to this exercise. I think it's a great exercise, but the whole process involves people individually coming up with ways to do that, and then as a group coming back and picking from individuals to create a better group effort. So in the end, that's the story. And for most people, I was watching the outbrief, and for most people, they're just pictorially, going way back from how you harvest the wheat, and then how you make flour, and then how you make bread, and then how you put it in the toaster. For this one individual, who I think the world of, his name is Kevin Phillips, and he had no toaster in his in his pictorial depiction. And he showed, just putting sandwiches on a frying pan, and that's how he made toast. And I said, why did you do that? And he said, sir, my family grew up in Kenya, and we don't make toast using that toaster. But the whole point behind that is the end results were the same, right? It was just a different way of getting there. And I think it's good for our Army to have that. And again, I'm very critical about sometimes about initiative for diversity, because I think it has to go beyond words. It has to go beyond programs. I think the programs are good, but it has to kind of be inculcated into who we are as an institution, right? Subconsciously. So that way it's not something that you try hard to do. It should come natural. And I'll give you another example that I'm living today, and I'm not touting this as, General Viet's got got all this stuff figured out, right? So my front office, right? I'm obviously, Vietnamese American. My secretary is a Japanese local national, all right? My executive assistant is a 60-year-old white male. My aide-de-camp is African American. My executive assistant, enlisted executive assistant, is African American, and he's gay. And then my commo sergeant is a staff sergeant, and he's Caucasian. Pretty well diverse. And the reason I'm proud of that is I didn't go into this job saying, well, I'm going to pick one of each, right? My whole thing was, my philosophy for diversity is don't do diversity for diversity's sake. But when all things are equal, right? When all things are equal, you got to give diversity a chance. And that's been my approach to leadership this whole time, right? And if you look at my front office staff, it's like, wow, maybe I have embraced those ethos, and maybe we're doing something right here, because it's a very high performing front office, and the staff will tell you that. So again, it's a very myopic, very small sample of what that looks like. But I think people got to start embracing this stuff and live by it, and stop just preaching, or waiting until May to start talking about this stuff and celebrate for the month of May instead of just living it throughout the whole year, right?
Yes, sir. Thank you. That being said, with your background as the first Vietnamese American general in the United States Army, do you, and I'm sure with many other firsts as well, do you feel like there's an extra weight on your shoulders? You've inspired and continue to inspire a whole community of Asian Americans and non-Asian Americans, for that matter. How does that make you feel? Yeah,
I didn't really starting to realize that until I was a battalion commander, very low profile, and I was in New Orleans doing Hurricane Katrina as the DRF-1 for 82nd Airborne, and I was trying to convince a Vietnam vet to leave a flooded area and try to extract him, because he had a bunch of medical issues and stuff like that, and he needed the help. And that ended up on the front page of LA Times. I didn't know that because I was still in the mission there in New Orleans. And I that's the first time where I started to get notoriety, because very famous writer of Vietnamese descent, Mr. Anh Đình Quang Thái, wrote an article in Vietnamese, and he basically attests to the fact that he was so proud to see this young Vietnamese American, on the leading edge of our national defense, and actually out there helping people. And he didn't know, we had a Vietnamese American in such an important position. And so I knew immediately then that I was representing something much bigger than just, myself and my soldiers and my unit. And then after that, we had starting to get a lot of attention in the Vietnamese community. And I didn't think much of it besides the fact that it's kind of my duty to, provide that outlet for strategic outreach and be able to communicate to a very important sector of our country. But recently I've been getting a lot of emails from young Vietnamese Americans and other Asian Americans who actually have told me that they joined because I've inspired them to do so, right? So yes, I mean you do carry some weight on your shoulders to be able to represent at all times, but I welcome the challenge, and I'm ready for it.
Well, we're lucky to have you, sir. Going back to your NPR interview, toward the end, you talked about wanting to go back to Vietnam and perhaps finding your roots and getting some closure. Have you had time to make it back?
I've made it back one time, but I was in official capacity, so I couldn't really do much. I was actually in Hanoi. But I do want to go back, and I do want to, have the opportunity to take my kids back because all three of them were born here, and because of COVID and everything else, it just has not been possible.
Yeah, my parents, I think I was maybe 12 years old when my parents went back for the first time. I think the borders had just reopened, and my dad would have never confessed it to me, but my mom told me that when he went back for the first time and got off the plane as a Viet Kieu, as a Vietnamese American, just the tears and the weight and the emotion that shed as he returned. I've never been able to shake that memory. I'm glad that my mom was able to share that with me. Thanks for being so candid and open with us. This next question's it's a little difficult to answer, I think, but we'd be missing the point, and we'd be remiss, I think, if I didn't bring it up. There have obviously been reports and news and videos surfacing of Asian hate cases, especially a very tragic one in Georgia. How does that make you feel? And, is there something that we should be doing to help address this? Are there conversations that we need to be having?
Yeah, certainly we have to have the conversation, and this is absolutely something that we need to address. We've been having in the Army some very uncomfortable conversations to tackle, I would call harmful behaviors, whether it's suicide, sexual assault, sexual harassment, or racism, right? Each comes with a different set of solutions. And I would say, for me, I mean, I'm deeply hurt watching some of that stuff. But what I would say is I don't have the totality of the analysis to address, the issue of hate crime. I mean, it's out there. It would be naive for us not to think so. But they come in different form, and for me, I think in order to address the totality of the issues, we need to have a comprehensive approach towards it. Because, so hate crime, in my estimation, probably at one extreme, probably not as prominent, but there are other issues that we need to tackle as well, right? It's something, for example, I would say, and some of you may have experienced this, Pete, and you may have seen it yourself. I would, I'm not sure if I'm using the right term because I'm not, school trained in any of this stuff, right? But I would say something as latent as, systemic bias, for example. If you're in an organization or in a company whereby, you work as hard as this other person, and when all things are equal, right, you don't get the nod because diversity is not the number one thing in their mind, but they decide to choose the other person because maybe they believe that you're that good Asian, right? Where you're not going to say anything. You're just going to continue to do your job. You're going to remain loyal. And it was the easier choice for them to make. So I see that happens, in different institutions. The other thing I would say is the institutional inequality that you see, right? You look at some of the academic institutions, select ones where Asian Americans have to score roughly 15% more higher than the rest to be able to get in. I think all those things need to be addressed at the same time and comprehensively, right? And I think we need to do a better job at having a campaign that actually addresses those things, because without knowing the crux of the issues, right, we're just trying to fix symptoms right now, it seems like to me, in a lot of ways, and you got to fix the problem instead of the symptoms.
Sir, thank you. I have kind of a, oh, excuse me, hold on. Just as a quick reminder to our audience, if you have questions for Major General Luong, you can drop those in the comments section and we'll try to get to them before the end of our discussion. But I do have a personal question that I wanted to ask. It's always fascinating when I get an opportunity to talk to senior Army leaders. So over the years, I've come to realize many successful people have very disciplined routines, whether it's in the morning or night. Is there something that you do that's part of your routine, part of your personal discipline, that's helped you stay focused or stay prepared over the years?
Yeah, those who know me well would guess that I'm gonna put in a plug for good PT, right? That constitutes, I have a slide that says things that require no talent, and good PT is something that you do every day. But I think for me is I'm pretty proud of the fact that I'm able to maintain very good balance. I try to have dinner with my family each night. When I'm not deployed or when I'm not doing something extremely important, and then reading. I read ravenously. I think everybody should read. I think it not only opens up your mind, but it exposes you to new ideas and just new ways of thinking, and maybe something that you may not even agree with. But I think it's intellectual discourse. It's a great thing, and that's how people keep themselves sharpened each day. I don't spend a lot of time doing it, but I think about 30 minutes each night, is good.
Sir, thank you. When I get to PT on my own, I've been able to, I used to listen to rock music to kind of get me amped up for the PT, but I've since switched to podcasts and audiobooks. So maybe that's 2 in 1. Maybe I'm ahead of the game on this.
Yeah, rock music is fine too.
All right, sir. Thank you for the tip. We're going to change things up again. We're going to have a little fun to end things. I'm going to ask you just a series of questions, and if you could please give me the first answer that pops into your head. Here we go. Favorite duty station?
I would say Fort Bragg, North Carolina.
Airborne. We just lost half our audience right there from me saying that.
It's okay.
Most recent show or movie you watched?
Yeah, I saw The Age of the Samurai on Netflix. I highly recommend it. I mean, it's a very intriguing part of Japanese history there in the 1500s. Okay,
favorite book?
I would say Once an Eagle, because I make a lot of my officers read that. It's a great great book about leadership. It's pretty thick, though.
The rank you wore when you had the most fun in the Army?
I would say battalion commander, arguably possibly company commander, but battalion command is really the first time where you can actually influence and shape policy and have the authority to do a lot of things for people.
All right, Vietnamese coffee or Starbucks?
Vietnamese coffee all day.
I recommend it as well. Mac or PC?
Mac.
Truck or sedan?
Sedan.
Beach vacation or exploring the city?
Beach.
Your favorite ACFT event?
Sprint drag carry, because it breaks a lot of people down.
Sir, run or ruck?
Ruck.
All right. Sir, thank you so much for sharing your story with us, and for being an inspiration to us all, specifically those in the Asian American and Pacific Islander community, and to many others of all cultures and ethnicities. I just want to thank you and give you the opportunity to end today's virtual engagement with any closing comments that you might have.
Yeah, no, I just want to extend my gratitude to all those who have made a difference in my career. And I know some are watching out there. I owe you a great debt of gratitude. Also very thankful to our nation, right? I tell folks all the time, we're not perfect, right? But it's still the best nation in the world. And I strongly believe in that. And I hope you do too. And hats off to our institution. We talked about diversity, and we talk about some of the things that we're working on in the Army to improve our institution and going forward. But it's a great institution that I've been a part of, and it's been a privilege for me. And thank you for dialing in, everybody. Stay safe, and I do hope that our nation is on path to recovery from this coronavirus.
Amen. Thank you very much, sir. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today here on this Facebook Live. Stay safe.
Good to see you, Pete. Take care.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. All right, I think we're off now.
We are clear. I just cleared. We